The following is a presentation of Project Independence and WCWP. Project Independence is the Aging in Place initiative of the town of North Hempstead.
Welcome to Project Independence and You.
Good morning and welcome to Community Talk Radio. This is Project Independence and You on LIU Public Radio. Your host, Rebecca Miller, along with co-host Otto Lohse and show producer Kristina Liu. Kristina and I work together at the Town of North Hempstead Services for the Aging Project Independence, where Kristina is the Director of Senior Citizen Affairs and I am Deputy Commissioner. Good morning.
I'm a volunteer.
Morning, and Otto is everything else that there is to talk about Project.
I'm very fortunate to be able to be with this group, your top shelf.
Right back at you, my friend.
Yes.
Yep. And we're so happy that you're with us today, also as co-host to the radio show. This morning, we're talking to Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda is the Regional Administrator for the Administration for Community Living. We'll be talking all about their services and also May being Older Americans Month. So good morning and welcome. How are you, Rhonda?
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you back.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here.
I think it was last year we had you around the same time, right?
It was during Older Americans Month as well.
I guess that makes sense. Before we kind of delve into the Americans Month, Older Americans Month, can you just give us some updates and talk a little bit about also the history and background of the administration for community living?
Oh, I love to do that. Thank you. And you know, it's amazing when I go to various places and speak and I introduce myself as being with the Administration for Community Living, and I ask people whenever I go somewhere how many people have heard of my agency, and it's just it's amazing how many people have not heard of our agency and don't know what we do. And so I'm just so thrilled to have these opportunities to speak with folks and get the word out about ACL and what we do. So ACL actually is a relatively new agency in the federal government. We're within the Department of Health and Human Services, and ACL was established back in 2012 by bringing together the Administration on Aging, the Office on Disability, and the Administration on Developmental Disabilities. And we were created around the fundamental principle that everybody, regardless of their age or disability, should be able to live independently and fully participate in their communities. And we advocate across federal government for older adults and for people with disabilities. And our mission is to maximize the independence, well-being, and health of older adults, people with disabilities across the lifespan, that's everybody, all ages, and their families and caregivers. And it's just been a pleasure for me to be at ACL. I've been with ACL now since 2016. And we have a lot of programs in particular for older adults to help them live in the community.
What were some of the first programs or services or connections that started out early on in 2012, and kind of how have you progressed? I'm so interested, especially for Project Independence, how you grow, how you determine what is actually progressive and what you see coming down the pike.
Well, that's an interesting question. So actually, our major legislation, which pursuant to which we do our older adult programming and services, is the Older Americans Act. And the Older Americans Act actually goes back to 1965. So the Older Americans Act was implemented under the Administration on Aging. And so in 2012, when the Administration on Aging merged to become ACL, the Older Americans Act programs came with it. So the Older Americans Act programs have been around for a long time. The Older Americans Act is scheduled to be reauthorized every 5 years. Sometimes it is. Sometimes they skip the 5 years, but it still keeps going. And Congress appropriates funding for the Older Americans Act every year on an annual basis. And when the Older Americans Act is reauthorized every several years, typically Congress makes changes to it, amends it, updates it to keep it up to date with interesting things going on. So for example, I think it was back in 2016, information was added into the Older Americans Act to have ACL put out information that could be helpful for helping older adults who were Holocaust survivors. That was done in 2016. it's been updated periodically to add evidence-based programming. That's programming that is proven to be effective and helpful to people. So as time goes on, it's updated and modernized over time. It's really kind of a living piece of legislation. It's very interesting.
Right, because the population, the volume of seniors are much larger and continue to grow. 65-year-olds, of course, we know 10,000 a day turning 65, and people living a lot longer, 90s into their hundreds. So, I'm curious how you keep up with, the needs of such a huge volume, because you're also leading the way for programs like Project Independence to follow.
Yep. And actually, the Older Americans Act serves older adults 60 and older. So we actually, for purposes of the Older Americans Act, right, anybody 60 and older qualifies for our programs. And the Older Americans Act is divided into titles. So we have the main titles that we work with under which programs are provided for older adults are Titles 3 and Title 7. Title 3 is where you see the supportive services that are helping people to live independently in the community. So we have Title 3B. Title 3B is really the broadest category of services. It's things like in-home services, like personal care services in the home, homemaker services, chore services. It could be legal assistance and tax preparation services, financial assistance and case management. It could be senior center activities, health promotion activities. It could be even health screenings that might be done at a senior center, for example, blood pressure screenings, even mental health screenings, things like that. Again, socialization activities, recreation activities, and other activities that are just generally for the welfare of older adults. So that's our broadest category of services. And then we have our Title 3C program, and that's where you have the meals that are provided. And probably our most famous program, probably that people recognize us for, is the program that a lot of people refer to as Meals on Wheels. And Meals on Wheels isn't really the name of our program. Meals on Wheels is actually the name of an entity that does home delivered meals and other services, but there are other providers that do that service. So we look at it in terms of congregate meals, which are meals being provided at a senior center or some other kind of community place where people are gathering, where you're socializing and getting the meal and socialization. And then we have our home delivered meal program for folks who have difficulty getting out for whatever reason and need to get that nutritious meal at home. And those are our two very well-known nutrition programs. And the congregate meal program is doing a lot more than providing a meal. It's doing that very important socialization for people, and it's also oftentimes providing education. Might be providing education about healthy nutrition or some other kind of education, or it might be just doing even entertainment to get people out of the house and socializing. And even that home delivered meal, for a lot of folks getting that home delivered meal, that person bringing that meal to them at home, that may be the only person they see that day or even that week, that person who's dropping off that meal for them. So that's, again, an opportunity for there to be some kind of connection with other people. And it allows the meal program delivering that meal to check on that person, to see how that person is doing, and just get a check and a look at that person to make sure everything is okay with that person. Then we have
one of my granddaughters, by the way.
Yep.
I'm sorry. One of my granddaughters actually worked for Meals on Wheels. She's a social worker when she first got out of college, and told me many times that she would wind up having a real friendship with the people that she was delivering the meals to. And she's that type of person, obviously, or she wouldn't have gone into social work, who engages with these people, and she loved them, and they loved it. Point being, I support what you're saying. No,
I think that's
it can
great.
be a very
Thank
big
you.
deal.
Yeah, and thank you for pointing that out. With a lot of these meal programs, whether it's the home delivered meal program or if it's a program being done at a senior center or another community type situation, there are opportunities for volunteers in addition to paid employees who may be, for example, working for Meals on Wheels and delivering those meals or checking in on folks. There are opportunities for volunteers of all ages. A lot of older adults who are retired, for example, volunteer for these programs and deliver the meals or volunteer at the meal site where the meals are provided. So that's a great opportunity for folks. Volunteering is a huge health is huge for one's health. It also helps people make social connections and stay connected to their community and feel a sense of purpose. So volunteer opportunities are great as well. And again, that program provides that. And so that's great, Otto, to hear of your daughter also being involved
Granddaughter.
in that kind of granddaughter, I'm sorry, in that kind of a
That's all right.
program.
Yeah.
So
No,
then we
she
have
enjoyed
our
it,
three. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, she enjoyed it, but the reality is that she moved on, to better, not, I wouldn't say better position. Yeah, better position. She got paid more.
Well, professional growth. She was moving on to the
That's a
next
good way to
stage of
put
her
it.
Professional
career.
growth. Okay, we'll stick with that. Right.
Right.
Then we have our 3D program, D as in dog. That was where we have our health promotion programs. And Congress, I would say back in maybe, I'm trying to remember what year it was, sometime, maybe the 2016 amendment, or it might have been an earlier amendment. Congress decided that those programs that we're using our funds for to do those programs should be evidence-based. And again, that means they're proven to be effective and to be helpful to people as far as their health. And so our agencies are offering these evidence-based health promotion programs with the Title 3D funds. Those could be things like, and you may have heard of some of these things, chronic disease self-management programs where folks are learning to manage their disease. It could be diabetes, it could be something else, it could be arthritis. Sometimes it's a pain management program. There also are programs aimed at caregivers to help them deal with their caregiving role. We have programs aimed at balance, helping people maintain their balance and strengthen their ability themselves and their ability to maintain their balance, which is really important, especially if we're trying to deal with people, being able to manage not falling or reducing their chances of falling. So we have that program. And then finally in 3E, we have our caregiver support program, Title 3E. And that program provides a variety of support services for caregivers. So these are for caregivers of older adults. So this could be a caregiver and any adult caregiver of any age caring for an older adult, as well as older relative caregivers. Those are folks 55 and older who are caring for an adult under age 60 who has a disability, as well as children. And it gets a little bit complicated. Excuse me, I don't want to get too much into the weeds.
Right.
But if it's a caregiver of a child, it can't be their parent. It's got to be another person. And so under the 3E program for caregivers, we provide individual counseling, support groups, training and education, and probably the largest service that's provided under that is respite. So we give caregivers a break. So that's a really important program. Something like 85% of care in this country is provided by informal, unpaid caregivers.
Absolutely.
They are the backbone of in-home care for people who need it in this country. And while it's very rewarding, it can be incredibly stressful. And so we really need to support caregivers. And I think oftentimes people don't think of themselves as a caregiver. And they don't really recognize it.
Right.
And I would say probably most people in this country, you either have been a caregiver or you're currently a caregiver or you're going to be a caregiver at some point in your life in the future. So those are our main supportive service programs that we have under the Older Americans Act.
Rhonda, could you talk a little bit about the path to these services and programs? Because to our listeners, you're talking a lot of wonderful services. How do they access these services? And do you act as an umbrella over these services and network? So just a little bit more how people can access and how you kind of oversee it all.
That's a great question because I could be talking about this and as you're saying, people won't know how to actually get the service. Let me just explain a little bit about how it's structured and how the funding is structured, and then I can tell people where they can call to get assistance. So we have the Older Americans Act, and the funding goes out from the Administration for Community Living to every state aging department. So every state under the Older Americans Act has to designate one agency to be the state unit on aging under the Older Americans Act. That's the
So
term
for
we
us,
use.
it would be NYSOFA, New York State Office of
Yes.
Aging. Okay.
The New York State Office for the Aging. Our funding goes to NYSOFA. And then NYSOFA, in turn, awards that funding to its 59 area agencies on aging. New York actually has more area agencies on aging than any other state. Pennsylvania comes in second at 52. But so in New York, there are 59 area agencies on aging. So again, NYSOFA has a formula that is approved by our agency. They use a formula to distribute those funds, and they're using factors of need, economic need and social need, for looking at how to distribute those funds. And they're looking at populations. And so they're looking at demographic data, and they use this formula again that we have approved, and they use that to distribute the funds among the area agencies on aging. The area agencies on aging, in turn, will then contract with local provider agencies to actually provide the service. I love how this structure works. I think it's a great idea. And again, it goes back years and years and years, and it still works so well. The idea is, at the end of the day, we're pushing the funds down to the local community organizations who best understand their communities and can best get those services out to people at the local level. So that's how the funding is getting out and getting distributed. And in New York, NYSOFA has something called New York Connects. And you can just go online to the New York to get to New York Connects. And I apologize, I don't have New York Connects phone number, but you can get their phone number. Maybe we can get that during a break.
We will get that during a break, and people can actually call 311 also, and we'd be able to get them that. But we're going to take a quick break. After
excellent.
break, we'll continue talking with Rhonda Schwartz from the Administration for Community Living. You're listening to Project Independence in You on LIU Public Radio.
Take WCWP with you wherever you go with the WCWP app. Listen live 24/7 to all of our streams, all from one app. Plus, call the studios directly from the app and visit our social media. Download the app through the iOS App Store on Apple devices or the Google Play Store on Android by searching WCWP Radio, or visit WCWP.org for links. The WCWP app, available now on iOS and Android devices.
Welcome back to Project Independence in You on LIU Public Radio. I'm Rebecca Miller, along with Otto Lohse and Kristina Liu. We are talking to Rhonda Schwartz from the Administration for Community Living. Welcome back. Rhonda, so before the break, we were talking about kind of how we access what agencies, how it all works, and you were talking about some of these great Long Island agencies and programs and how to access.
Right, thank you. Yes, and I want to give out the phone number for New York Connects. So again, New York Connects is a service of the New York State Office for the Aging, and they operate all over the state. They're in every AAA region. The phone number to call is 800-342-9871. That's 800-342-9871. If you call that number and tell them where you're from, they're going to be able to connect you to where you can find out about services that are available for you. And they will talk to you and figure out what services you need.
Is there also a website involved with that?
There is a website, and we'll have to get that also, because I don't have, for some reason, I don't have that either. I apologize. But
It's actually just nyconnects.ny.gov.
Connect, not plural.
Connects, yes, Connects plural. It's
Plural.
NY Connects, and it'll be up at the end of the video, and call 311 if you need to.
Sure.
And I want to provide a couple of other phone numbers, if I could, for folks to call for resources. If you don't want to call New York Connects, or if you're from outside of New York and you want to get some more information about services going on within New York State, you could call the Elder Care Locator. The Elder Care Locator is a nationwide service that connects people in the U.S. and their caregivers with local supports resources. It's been around since 1991. It's funded by the Administration for Community for community living. The website for the elder care locator is eldercare, eldercare.acl.gov. And the phone number for the elder care locator is 800-677-1116. That's 800-677-1166. I also want to just mention, if anyone has questions about Medicare, we also have a free, it's conflict-free, unbiased, objective counseling that is available for anyone who has questions about Medicare, whether you're thinking that you're going to be going into Medicare shortly or you're in Medicare and you want to know what your options are for changing or moving around. And that is the State Health Insurance Assistance Program. It's known as SHIP. In New York, though, it's known as HICAP,
Right.
and that's HIICAP.
Barry Klitzberg.
It's the Health Insurance Information Counseling and Assistance Program. That's what HICAP stands for in New York. And the phone number for HICAP is 800-701-0501. Just some information there to help people if they want to find out who to call for help.
Rhonda, you mentioned Title III and Title VII. What's Title VII?
Title VII is more of the protective services, and services that are helping with providing funding for state adult protective service programs. We also have the Ombudsman program. You may have heard of the Long-Term Care Ombudsman. That is a program that advocates for residents of long-term care facilities. It's a very good program. It's in every state. I think it's in most territories. I'm not sure if it's in all territories. It's certainly in New York, but it's the Long-Term Care Ombudsman program. We provide funding for that program under Title VII. We also have some regulations for that program that they have to comply with. And then we provide a small amount of funding under Title VII that states can use to help support their protective service efforts in their states.
Excellent.
That's what Title VII is.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunately needed.
So could we talk?
It is, and there's. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I want you to finish what you were about to say.
I was just going to say, there's actually Congress in the last year or so has also provided under the I think it's the Elder Justice Act, additional funding for adult protective services programs. That's a new funding that we haven't had before, and ACL also recently came out with some regulations that accompany that program that I can talk about later.
You can actually bring them up now. I mean, that's a very important, the ACS program. So,
oh, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
So the rule actually was just published earlier this month. So it's the first time we've ever had federal regulations for adult protective services, and the purpose is to promote high quality adult protective services throughout the United States and consistency in services across the U.S. So the final rule establishes a set of national minimum standards for the operation of adult protective service programs that all state adult protective service programs must meet, and encourages states actually to exceed those regulations. So it requires, for an example of the kinds of things that are required, states have to ensure that their planning and delivery of services respect the right of adults to make their own choices, and that the choices are driven by the people who are making the person receiving the service, and stronger protections for clients who are subject, for example, or at risk of guardianship, requires time frames for responding to reports of potential neglect or abuse. So it's time for that kind of a regulation, and I'm really happy to see that.
Yeah, that's great.
Is there anything?
Oh, and I just want to mention the regulations take effect June 7th of this year.
Oh, great. Okay.
But entities who are regulated by it have until June 7th of 2028 to fully comply, because there could be some effort involved in complying.
You know, is there anything like Older Americans Month? I know a number of people who are in the category like Project Independence is great at assisting people to try to help them stay at home. And then unfortunately, you get to a point sometimes where that's just not practical. And I know a lot of people who've gone through, I know one specifically right now, which I mentioned to you offline, a couple, all of a sudden, the wife is in kind of a dementia category. The husband's 91 years old. He has his own little problems. So for them to be at home turns out to be pretty complicated and not easy to manage. So they wind up going to assisted living, which I'm assuming they can afford for a while, but it's like $14,000 a month because the wife needs more care because she's in that stage. You know, I didn't know this, but they actually categorize them. He's category 0, she's category 6. So the price of your visit or your stay at this assisted living is based on your category. So all of a sudden you're up and you're paying $14,000 a month net, and it doesn't take long to get wiped out. Is there anything in the cards that you visualize, like the adult protective services, supportive services, where that kind of thing is really being addressed with a lot of energy? Because I think it's pretty bad when you get to a certain level in your life and all of a sudden you really need help and you get wiped out, basically. You know, it's a lot of people I know in my category talk about it, and they're of concern. How do you beat that? You know, what can you do? And there's no real shortcuts, there's stuff you can do legally, but overall, it's I would say a pretty it's a very emotional and difficult time for people in their lives. And I was just wondering what the views were with an organization that's very involved with this type of thing.
Wow, Otto, that's a huge question. I think we could talk about that all day. I will tell you that assisted living facilities and nursing care facilities are really outside of the purview of the Administration for Community Living. If they receive Medicaid funding, they're regulated by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And our connection to those kinds of facilities is really through our long-term care ombudsman program. If people have questions about those facilities, if they're looking at different kinds of facilities, they certainly could reach out to the long-term care ombudsman program to get some information and maybe some suggestions as to how to deal with looking at that. I will tell you, New York has Medicaid waiver programs. I believe they just got a new Medicaid waiver, and I have to tell you, I'm not an expert on it, so I don't know what they might be doing or what additional opportunities there might be. But those Medicaid waiver programs offer in-home services for folks. You also have the in-home services that we provide under the Older Americans Act that I talked about, the personal care services, the homemaker services, the respite services. So there are services that are available out there to try to help families and caregivers help keep their loved ones at home. And I do want to focus on something that is an issue related to all of this, and that's the direct care workforce. There's a shortage in the direct care workforce. And I want to tell you the story. I was working in a different region a few years ago, and I heard about a young person. I think it was a person with severe disabilities who was maybe in his late 20s or early 30s. He had been approved in his state for the hours that he needed from Medicaid in order to stay at home and have services at home so his family could keep him in the home. But because there's such a shortage in the direct care workforce, every so often they were losing their home care workers and couldn't find the workers that they needed to be able to provide the services that they were approved for. And so periodically this person was ending up in facilities and not being able to go home for long stretches at a time because they couldn't find people to provide the service. And that's unfortunately, I think, all too common a story. So I want to tell you, the Administration for Community Living back in 2022 established the Direct Care Workforce Strategy Center to provide technical assistance to states and service providers and facilities to try to improve the recruitment, retention, and training and professional development of the direct care workforce, it's really a problem. I mean, when you look at, for example, the minimum wage going up so much over the last several years, that's a great thing. And it's fabulous that we've been able to raise the minimum wage. The problem is people can do less demanding, less stressful jobs and make the same wage that they can make in many cases providing this kind of service. So there's been a lot of pressure on these kinds of entities in finding employees to do the work. So it's low wages, lack of benefits, limited opportunities for career growth, and other factors have resulted in this crisis of direct care workforce professionals. So I'm really excited. Go ahead.
No, you bring up a point that I think is very, very, very strong and valid. And I think that I've been through this with my own parents. And, for some reason, people, you use the term direct care workforce, a lot of times they're viewed as low-level people, in my judgment, all right, which is very, very wrong because there are only certain people that can really do that job properly. There are some who do it because they have no choice, and they probably don't want to do it, but they have to do it. I think part of it is really the image of that type of work. It's a very, to me, difficult job. I wouldn't be good at it, I don't think. I think, it's a certain skill that you need and a emotional makeup that you require to do that kind of work. So I think we got to elevate how we look at people who do that as well, besides the financial part of it.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with you. It takes a great amount of compassion. It takes a really caring, patient person to do this kind of work and someone who's really devoted. And I do think it's important that we recognize these folks are working very hard. It's not an easy job. And in my opinion, personally, I think doing things, and I'm hearing states doing things like this, for example, making sure these folks are really recognized as part of the care team, involved in the care planning, treated like professionals, right. If they can be given opportunities for advancement, for career growth, better benefits. We need to recognize this type of work as the profession that it is. We really need to give it more respect and recognize it more.
I feel like I use this word every show about something, but it's stigma. There is a stigma to home health aides, and being in Project Independence, I can see the issues, the affordability of it on behalf of the person needing it, and the home health aide that may need to travel long distances to get to a client's home. So, there's a lot of factors. And kind of going back to what Otto was saying, too, is, of course, comes down to affordable housing. Whether you're in an assisted living, you want to stay in your own home, you need to leave your house for accessibility reasons, or it's too big, or it's not in the right area, whatever the reason, there's so few affordable housing options for seniors, and which is the saddest thing, because they're now becoming the population, and worked hard their whole lives, raised their family, and now they're struggling to kind of find affordable housing in a place where they want to be. So that's kind of a lot of what I'm hearing too. And the home health aides connected. It's all connected.
Well, the other thing is like Medicaid, all right? Many times, and I'm not knocking the legal profession, but many times you end up, if you're going to get involved with Medicaid, you wind up getting involved with an attorney. There's no non-legal advice, if you will, that I'm fully aware of. It seems like, you need a trust, you need this, you need that. All of which costs money, and a lot of people can't afford that part of it. So, how do you? Are there people, frankly, who, like we talked about Medicare and high cap? Are there people that provide guidance as far as Medicaid planning or advanced directive planning, where it's not somebody who can benefit by you doing certain things because you're going to pay for a trust or whatever?
So you're asking if there are any kind of services that are
guide
that are
you.
not private.
Yeah.
That I have to tell you, Otto, I'm not aware of that. I mean, I know there are a lot of elder law attorneys out there, folks who specialize in this kind of thing. There are other companies, I think, that are out there that just sell themselves as doing this kind of planning for folks. So it's not my area. I have to tell you again, it's not my area of expertise. So I apologize. I can't really tell you too much about it, but I, certainly would, personally, I would think that people should act with caution when they're looking at who they're going to work with to do any kind of planning.
Well, that's an honest answer, and that's good. Unfortunately, I don't know of any easy way to get knowledge or education.
I mean, sometimes, you can get in touch with bar associations and some of the law schools. Maybe they have programs that could help and guide, but we actually have to take a break. And after the break, we will continue talking with Rhonda Schwartz from the Administration for Community Living. You're listening to Project Independence in You on LIU Public Radio.
WCWP is your home for great music and great conversation. You'll find all that and more on WCWP.org. Listen live on the web, check out the lineup, subscribe to podcasts, and stay up to date on the latest station events. Get in touch with us and let us know if you like what you're hearing. And find out how you can support or get involved at the only community public radio station serving Nassau's North Shore. Plus, sign up to get a free bumper sticker. It's all online at WCWP.org.
Welcome back to Project Independence in You on LIU Public Radio. I'm your host, Rebecca Miller, along with our co-host, Lohse, and of course, our show producer, Kristina Liu. We are talking to Rhonda Schwartz from the Administration for Community Living. And during this next segment, we're going to be talking a lot about Older Americans Month and what that means. But before we do, I know, Rhonda, you wanted to talk a little bit about legal assistance.
Yes, I did. I did just want to mention, because we were touching on legal assistance in the last segment. Under the Older Americans Act, we do provide funding, and every state is required to have legal assistance providers. And so we do have legal assistance available. And again, if you contact New York Connects, you can get to your local legal assistance provider. But they are mostly helping with things like if you're not getting benefits that you're entitled to, or if you're in subsidized housing and you have an eviction issue. Those are the kinds of issues they're helping people with for the most part, but you could contact them and see what services they might be able to help with.
Okay, great. So we had those contact numbers, and if you're interested in getting that phone number, you can always call 311 or dial 516-869-6311, and we'll be happy to get you all the contacts and websites that we've mentioned, that Rhonda's mentioned on the show today. So Rhonda, tell us about Older Americans Month 2024.
Yes, I'm so excited about Older Americans Month, and we still have plenty of time to go in this Older Americans Month. So every May, the Administration for Community Living leads our nation's observance of Older Americans Month. This is a time to recognize the contributions of older adults in our country to everything in our society, highlight aging trends as well, and reaffirm our commitment to serving the older adults in our communities. And every year we have a theme for Older Americans Month, and this year the theme is Powered by Connection. And that is recognizing the deep impact that meaningful relationships and social connections have on our health and well-being. I don't know if you're all familiar with this report that came out from the Surgeon General in 2023 that declared that social isolation is a major health issue. They issued an advisory about it, and they actually commented that it affects your mental and physical health to such an extent that being socially isolated has a similar adverse effect on your health to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
15?
Wow.
Who can afford to smoke 15 cigarettes a day? But
it's really a serious health issue.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It really
So
is.
I will tell you,
Yeah.
ACL recognized this in particular during the pandemic when everybody was really isolated, and even those older adults who normally socialize were not socializing. And ACL started a campaign called Commit to Connect. It's ongoing and it's really been evolving, and it's in partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health. It's a cross-sector initiative. It's coordinated by a national nonprofit organization called US Aging. And the purpose is to reach people who are socially isolated. And the aim is to connect people who are living with isolation with programs and resources to build social connections that they need to thrive. And so there are a couple of main strategies with this program: increasing awareness and availability of programs and strategies that address social isolation and loneliness, and building and strengthening collaboration with current and potential partners just to leverage our collective efforts, resources, and innovations to increase social connections throughout the United States.
It's very hard to identify social isolated seniors. We had found during COVID that we started airing a lot of our programming on North Hempstead Television, which gave us this venue. And of course, we wound up doing Project Independence in You on Zoom, and continued all of these services that way. And through that, we actually started getting calls from seniors who had no idea about our program because they don't have a computer, and they just still watch their television. So they were able to find us that way. But it's very, very hard to, access people who are isolated. So I'm curious how you identify those people, because, it's not like we can go in and say, hey, your neighbor said, you haven't come out in, quite a while, maybe your newspapers are gathering up, whatever the issue.
Well, it really would be, this kind of work would be happening at the local level, down at the local provider level, again, because at ACL, we're pushing our funding out down through the state and the local provider agencies. So they're really the ones who would be doing this work. And a lot of it is referrals. It might be a relative or a friend who's contacting the agency, and they might report that they think somebody is socially isolated, and then the agency will send somebody out to check on them. They might have case managers or otherwise do some kind of checks. It could be just local community folks who know of people and are referring them in. It's difficult. It's not so easy to find everyone, especially if they're not going to initiate something on their own and do it themselves. It's not easy.
Right, because I think we're going to see it more and more with, the population growing older and people who are cognitively really doing well, but, the body ages and you're not even able to get out. So that's a whole nother level of people who are kind of, I want to say forcibly, but becoming isolated because they can't get around like they used to. So that's a really good point. If you recognize someone in your family or a neighbor, you can call these agencies. I don't know how they can go in cold and just say, hey, I hear you're lonely or isolated, but I'm sure there's ways that the agencies have of trying to reach out to someone in that scenario.
Part of the scenario, I think, is that as you get older, you could have 30 friends when you're 50. And then when you're 60, you're down to 20 friends. And the next thing you know, you're down to maybe 1 or 2 friends. And the next thing you know, maybe you're the only friend left. So it's people who even people who are socially inclined can get into that boat easily, because as you get older, it's more difficult. Now, I happen to be lucky. I have a big family and kids that live close by. That helps. But I know people who are not in that good, fortunate position, and they lose friends, and it's difficult. All of a sudden, you don't go out and your kids are not in school. You don't make new friends. It's difficult, because all of a sudden you're in a different bracket. So I think it's even more complicated than you realize because of that. It's not that people want to be isolated, but they get forced into being isolated basically because of loss that goes on in their life, really.
I think so, and I think also the pandemic contributed to this a lot, too. I don't know about the rest of you, but I got into some kind of a sedentary funk during the pandemic, and led a very introverted lifestyle for those years, trying to isolate myself as well. I'm a caregiver for older parents, and so I was trying to be really careful for myself and not expose myself. And I think it's hard once we've done that for a couple of years to get ourselves off the couch and get moving and get out and be social around other people again. I think it affects lots of people, not even just older people. It's a problem.
You know, what's interesting is you use the word years. We forget that COVID wasn't like a 1 month deal. Yeah. It was several years, and it really allowed people to get into a groove, if you will, that maybe you don't get out of.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So Project Independence also, can help connect people to services. We have a lot of the offerings that ACL has and the agencies, the local agencies have. We also have access to and do have our own programs and services. And, during times where we know a storm's coming, a really bad storm, we do, know people that we need to kind of get the word out to, make sure you're ready to go, that kind of a thing. So any of the services that we've discussed today with Rhonda, for our listeners, you can always call 311 because we are dealing with that within, the town of North Hempstead and in a lot of different ways. So back to Older Americans Month. We just seem to just...
I just want to chime in, guys, your producer, Kristina, as I sit here and listen, and I think, Beck, you really summed it up good, and what Rhonda's kind of saying is that on the local level, it's so important for us to try and figure out creative ways to get in touch with people. But I wanted to let you know, Rhonda, in our Pioneer newsletter, it gets mailed out twice a year to over 60,000 households. But I put in a little article about Older Americans Month, and I have a little ACL, shout out to the ACL for that. So, so hopefully that gets to people that might not know about what's going on in the community.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. That's fantastic. And again, we still have a lot of time left in Older Americans Month. We have activity ideas and logos and templates for articles and things and social media graphics on our website. If you just go to acl.gov and look up Older Americans Month, you can find materials. And again, there are activity ideas that you could do. So I encourage folks, while we still have a couple weeks left in Older Americans Month, to maybe see what they could do to maybe do an activity. And it takes a village. It really does. To help we need to look out for each other in our communities. Yeah,
we definitely do.
Very true.
It's very true. It is very true.
Which I think is more difficult today than when I was a kid, because people live in more of a neighborhood back when than they do now. I know a lot of people, I'm right there with them, who really don't know your neighbors.
Yep.
It's a very different world. And when I was a kid, we knew everybody on the block and the block on the other street, and you knew everybody. And that's not the case anymore at all. Everybody's too busy running around, and they really don't even want to take the time to say hello because they might have to have a conversation, So it's a different planet, so we have to work within it.
And then we also have ageism, which is out there too.
Yes.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah, some people don't understand that they are going to get older.
Yeah.
They don't get it, but they will.
Yeah, and I think people don't realize the contribution that older people make to our society, in particular to our economy. I just want to mention, 50 plus households in New York State. This is according to a report from AARP. They did something called the Longevity Economy Outlook. 50 plus households in New York State accounted for 56 cents of every dollar spent in New York in 2018.
Wow.
And it's expected to, yeah. So and they accounted for 39% of New York State's tax revenue in 2018.
So why don't all of these marketers market more toward the older population and, get rid of the early bird special and start trying to get the older population, which really still has the money to buy things. We talk about this a lot on the radio show too, and in general, seniors, love to travel.
Yep.
restaurants, entertainment. But for some reason, it's just not, we say this too, it's just not sexy to market to older people for some reason. And it's a shame because I think if you want more spending, you want to sell your product,
Well, it's interesting. Last night I had the good fortune of being at dinner with a couple of my grandchildren, daughter and whatnot. And one of the conversations came up, like the ageism thing, all right? They didn't know, half of them didn't know who Paul Newman was, an actor, all right?
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know, but they didn't know. They didn't know.
Right.
So the point being, okay, you didn't know who he is, but I don't know who Garfunkel. I know Garfunkel, but Blotty Blotty and a Gets music group. I have no idea who they are. So you have to respect that, and I'll respect the fact that you don't know who Paul Newman was. So that's all part of the trade-off, I think, as far as age relationships go.
Right, and as people are living longer, people are going to be working longer. I was at an event recently, and someone was saying, one of the speakers was saying that we should not talk about retirement anymore. We should talk about reworking, so that people might change what they're doing and go in and continue working and do something else. And that we do need to consider, older workers have a lot to contribute to their workplaces with their wisdom and experience. And then I also saw an article this week, I forget where it was, about the difficulties that some people in their 50s and older have when they need to, if they get laid off or something and they need to find a new job, that there is, as you were saying, Rebecca, a stigma against hiring older workers, which is a problem. And I do want to mention also, just on the data front, because I love data, and this is interesting, this comes from NYSOFA, 64% of adults 60 and older in New York State own their own homes and have no mortgage.
Wow. In New York State, yeah. Probably not on Long
Yep.
Island, but definitely New York State.
Well, part of
And I do wanna
that is because we were fortunate enough to be able to buy homes when they weren't completely off the chart as far as cost goes. You could buy a house for a couple $100,000 or whatever 25 years ago.
Not even a couple
Right.
hundred,
Yeah,
like 100.
I mean now you can't 800,000 and below up is
Right. And older adults also contribute tremendously to the long-term care system in New York State. There are 4.1, this is again according to NYSOFA data, there are 4.1 million caregivers in the state of New York. Their average age is 64. And their caregiving for people of all ages is valued at $32 billion.
Wow.
It's interesting.
But you're right. I mean, I don't know why people aren't marketing more to older people.
Yeah. It would make sense. If I had a product, it would definitely be marketed to.
There are people marketing to older
Now
people.
there are, yeah, there
It's
are
scams and fraud.
Right, yeah, right. They're preying on it. They're not
That's
marketing.
preying on older people,
Well,
right?
that's marketing.
It's,
There's a bunch
it's
of
frightening.
people sitting
I
around.
actually heard of a scam now that they can do with AI. They can actually find, I've heard of this somewhere, where they found a grandchild's voice.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We talk
we
about
talk
that.
about it all the time.
It's
Yeah.
Oh my God. And then pretended to be that child calling the grandparent needing help. That's frightening.
That's why we talk also about that you need to have a word within the family that no one else knows, or, you
good
have to
idea.
ask questions if you have suspicion that only that person would know. So, yeah, it is. It's really, AI is scary. But before we
scary.
go, I just want to mention, because you guys have some really nice ideas for activities going forward, or arrange for local school students to interview older adults in the community and write a short biography. We love that. Use video chat technology to host a storytelling party. These are great suggestions. Also, organize game night. I know Otto is really a proponent for that kind of stuff, getting together. Coordinate a musical event. Coordinate classes, workshop, lectures. Host a fundraising event, and so many others. We do have to go. I want to thank you so much, Rhonda, for joining us today for a lot of information, talking today about Older Americans Month and also the Administration for Community Living. We also want to thank everyone for listening to us today. You're listening to Project Independence in You on LIU Public Radio.